In the vast expanse of the galaxy, representatives from 1,000 worlds had gathered in the grand chamber of the Galactic Council. The chamber, a massive space that resonated with a low, ethereal hum, was designed to accommodate beings of all shapes and sizes, from crystalline entities that shimmered in the soft light to gaseous forms encased in shimmering force fields. At the center of this great assembly was High Counselor Zixa, a being with iridescent tentacles that rippled with bioluminescence, signaling the start of a crucial meeting. The atmosphere grew tense with a palpable sense of urgency as she raised her tentacles, commanding silence from the council. Zixa's voice, transmitted simultaneously into the many languages of those present, filled the chamber. "Esteemed colleagues," she began, her tone gravely serious, her skin pulsing with anxiety, "we have convened this session to address a matter of utmost importance. Our long-range scouts have made contact with a species previously unknown to us. They call themselves humans." The mention of this new species rippled through the council like a wave of surprise and curiosity, but it also brought a deep sense of forewarning. The Galactic Council was accustomed to the discovery of new species. New life forms were encountered regularly, but it was rare for one to ignite such concern among the council members. Zixa's bioluminescent skin flickered with increasing intensity as she continued. "These humans have only recently achieved faster-than-light travel, yet in the short time since their breakthrough, they have established colonies on multiple worlds outside their home system. Their technological advancement is unlike anything we've seen in the known galaxy." A holographic display suddenly materialized in the center of the chamber, displaying a blue-green planet that orbited an unremarkable yellow star Earth, the humans' home world. Zixa's tentacles traced the outline of the planet. 3 centuries ago, they were still burning fossil fuels, embroiled in conflicts with primitive projectile weapons. Now, they have unified their world, terraformed neighboring planets, and begun to explore the stars. Their rapid pace of technological progress is astonishing. The image shifted, showing massive space stations, thriving colonies on barren worlds that had been transformed into lush, habitable environments, and sleek starships that pushed deeper into the vastness of known space. Zixa's tone grew darker as she continued. "It is not merely their technological prowess that raises concern. It is their very nature. Humans are adaptable, unpredictable, and resilient in ways we have never encountered before." The hologram shifted again, displaying scenes of humans in various situations surviving in harsh environments, improvising solutions to complex problems, and displaying both acts of remarkable kindness and unimaginable cruelty. They are capable of both tremendous compassion and unspeakable violence. Zixa's voice lowered as she spoke. "Their history is one of brilliant achievements and horrific atrocities. They create and destroy with equal fervor. They possess the ability to shape entire worlds, both for good and for ill." A delegate from the Silicon Consciousness, a race of sentient artificial intelligences, raised a question. "High Counselor, surely you are not suggesting that this young species poses a threat to the established order of the galaxy?" The being's voice echoed with skepticism, its form flickering slightly as if to express confusion at the gravity of the claim. Zixa paused, her tentacles coiling tightly in a gesture that conveyed both patience and deep concern. "Not necessarily a threat, delegate, but a force that could reshape the galaxy in ways we cannot predict. And that unpredictability is why we have called this session to discuss the matter at hand." She gave the assembly a moment to absorb her words before continuing. "We propose that all spacefaring civilizations be warned about humanity and advised to approach them with caution. We recommend that any significant interactions with them be reported to the Council immediately so we can monitor their development and prevent potential conflicts from escalating." The room erupted in discussion. Some delegates voiced support for Zix's proposal, arguing that humanity's rapid rise was cause for concern, while others disagreed, feeling that it was an overreaction. The debate grew heated as voices clashed, some advocating for restraint and others for bold action. Zixa remained calm, moderating the debate, occasionally providing additional data and observations from the scouts who had encountered humans firsthand. As the discussion raged on, a sudden commotion drew everyone's attention to the entrance of the chamber. A new delegate had arrived, pushing through the crowd. It was Kaiser, the representative of the Zarkoni Empire from the galaxy's outer rim. His exoskeleton gleamed with an almost metallic sheen, and his eyes were compound-like, reflecting the harsh light of the council room. With a click of his mandibles, he offered an apology for his tardiness. "My apologies, High Counselor," Kaiser said, his voice smooth yet carrying a tone of arrogance. "Our empire's borders are expanding rapidly, and there was much to attend to before I could join you." Zixa nodded in acknowledgement, gesturing for him to join the assembly. "We were just concluding our discussion on the human species," Zixa said, her voice carrying a hint of concern. "Perhaps you would like to share the Zarkoni perspective on this matter." Delegate Kaiser. Kaiser's compound eyes gleamed with interest as he stood, his posture dismissive. "Humans," he chuckled. "Yes, we've heard whispers about these primitives. Tell me, High Counselor, why does the mighty Galactic Council tremble at the thought of such a young, insignificant species?" The chamber fell silent, the air thick with tension at Kaiser's dismissive tone. Zixa's bioluminescent skin flickered with frustration, though she remained composed. "We do not tremble, Delegate Kaiser," she replied, her voice sharp. "We seek to understand and ensure peaceful coexistence. The humans are not only advancing at an extraordinary rate, but they are also more resilient and unpredictable than any species we have encountered." Kaiser raised an eyebrow, his tone laced with sarcasm. "Resilient? What threat could a species barely out of its gravity will possibly pose to the likes of us?" He gestured dismissively, his arrogance palpable. "Our empire has brought peace to dozens of worlds. These humans are no different. Perhaps they could benefit from our guidance." Zixa's tentacles stiffened in frustration. "I urge you to review the data we have collected," she said, her voice now firm. "Their rate of advancement, their adaptability, and their nature, it is unlike anything we've seen before. We believe it is in the best interest of the galaxy to approach them with caution." Kaiser clicked his mandibles in what could have been a laugh. "Your concern is noted, High Counselor, but the Zarkoni Empire will chart its own course, as it always has." With that, Kaiser turned and left the chamber, his dismissal of the Council's warning leaving an uneasy silence in his wake. Zixa raised her tentacles once more, signaling for silence as the chamber buzzed with murmurs of concern. "Let us vote on the proposal to issue a galaxy-wide advisory regarding humanity," she said, her voice steady but filled with unease. "We must act quickly to prevent any potential conflicts before they escalate." As the votes were tallied, Zixa couldn't shake the sense of foreboding that had settled over her. The Zarkoni's dismissal of the Council's warning could have far-reaching consequences not just for humanity, but for the entire galaxy. She watched as the vote was finalized, and despite the passing of the advisory, she felt a deep sense of concern. The galaxy might soon be thrust into an unpredictable future, with humanity at the center of it. The Council's warning had been ignored, and Zixa feared that the consequences would unfold in ways no one could anticipate. The Galactic Council had barely begun to settle into a tense silence after the heated debate about humanity, when the doors at the far end of the chamber slid open with a soft hum. The assembly turned its collective attention toward the newcomer. It was Khazar, the representative from the Zarkoni Empire, one of the most powerful empires in the galaxy, known for its strength and vast territorial reach. Khazar's sleek insectoid exoskeleton gleamed under the chamber's lights, reflecting his imposing presence. His compound eyes glimmered as he moved forward, his every step filled with purpose. His posture was as rigid and proud as his reputation. The hum of conversation gradually died down as Khazar reached the center of the room. Zixa, High Counselor of the Galactic Council, gave a slight nod of recognition, though her bioluminescent skin flickered in irritation. She had been monitoring the debate with increasing concern. And now, the presence of the Zarkoni delegate only added more weight to the growing tension. "Apologies for my tardiness," Khazar's voice rang out, smooth and dismissive as he addressed the council. "The Zarkoni Empire's borders are expanding rapidly, and there were matters that needed my immediate attention before I could join you. But I'm here now. I trust I haven't missed much." His tone was light, almost mocking, as if the council's concerns were of little consequence to him. Zixa gestured toward the holographic display still hovering in the center of the room, showing images of Earth, the humans' homeworld. "We were discussing the newly discovered species known as humans," she said, her voice cool but laced with caution. "Their rapid technological advancements and unpredictable nature have raised concerns among the Council. I believe it is a matter of grave importance that we proceed with caution." Khazar's eyes narrowed, but he couldn't help the sneer that tugged at his mandibles. "Humans?" he scoffed. "Why does the mighty Galactic Council tremble at the thought of these primitives?" He tilted his head in disbelief. What potential could a species barely out of its gravity will possibly have that would concern us? The room fell silent. Zixa's tentacles, usually a sign of calm, coiled tightly in frustration, but she held her ground. The arrogance of the Zarkoni delegate was nothing new, but it still grated on her nerves. "We do not tremble, delegate," she said, her voice sharper now. "We seek to understand these humans. Their potential is unlike anything we've seen before. We believe they are capable of changing the entire balance of the galaxy." Zixa gestured toward the holographic display still hovering in the center of the room, showing images of Earth, the humans' homeworld. "We were discussing the newly discovered species known as humans," she said, her voice cool but laced with caution. "Their rapid technological advancements and unpredictable nature have raised concerns among the Council. I believe it is a matter of grave importance that we proceed with caution." Khazar's eyes narrowed, but he couldn't help the sneer that tugged at his mandibles. "Humans?" he scoffed. "Why does the mighty Galactic Council tremble at the thought of these primitives?" He tilted his head in disbelief. What potential could a species barely out of its gravity will possibly have that would concern us? The room fell silent. Zixa's tentacles, usually a sigh. Khazar's compound eyes gleamed with amusement as he shifted on his feet. "A species barely capable of interstellar travel, and you believe they could change the balance of power?" He let out a low, rumbling laugh. "My dear Zixa, we have observed this species from the periphery. They are divided, fragmented, and scattered across only a handful of worlds. Their technology, though advancing, is still centuries behind the might of the Zarkoni Empire." Zixa's skin flashed a pattern of concern, but she maintained her composure. "Their rate of technological progress is accelerating rapidly. What was once primitive is now advanced at a pace that could quickly make them a force to be reckoned with." Do you not see the potential for conflict in that? Kaiser waved his hand dismissively. I see no reason to fear them, he said with a shrug. In fact, perhaps they could be a valuable addition to our empire. He leaned in slightly, his voice lowering with mock sincerity. Our empire has brought peace to dozens of worlds. These humans, with their vast untapped resources, could benefit greatly from our guidance. Why waste energy fearing them when we could simply assimilate them? A ripple of murmurs spread through the chamber at Kaiser's boldness. Some delegates shifted uncomfortably in their seats, while others seemed intrigued by the suggestion. However, Zixa's patience was wearing thin. She had seen this before: arrogance that led to underestimating a species, a mistake that had cost the galaxy dearly in the past. I urge you to reconsider, Delegate Kaiser, she said firmly. We are not asking for fear, but caution. The Council has witnessed the consequences of ignoring emerging species with unexpected potential. Humanity's resilience and adaptability are unmatched. They are unpredictable, capable of both great acts of kindness and unimaginable cruelty. To dismiss them as insignificant is a dangerous gamble. Kaiser's antennae twitched, and his mandibles clicked in amusement. The Galactic Council always overreacts to such things, he said with a dismissive wave. These humans are no different from the countless species we've encountered and absorbed into our empire. You believe their unpredictability makes them a threat. I believe it makes them an opportunity. Zixa's tentacles rippled with frustration, but she remained composed. We have no intention of underestimating humanity, but we also cannot afford to ignore the risks they may pose to the balance of peace in the galaxy. Their unpredictability is not merely a curiosity, it is a potential destabilizer. Kaiser's eyes narrowed as he looked around the room. I've heard enough, he said, his tone hardening. While I respect your caution, I believe it is misplaced. The Zarkoni Empire will chart its own course, as we always have. If these humans are as dangerous as you claim, we will handle them. He gave a slight bow and turned, striding out of the chamber without waiting for further discussion. The room fell silent, the weight of his words hanging heavily in the air. Zixa watched Kaiser leave, her mind racing with concern. The Zarkoni Empire had always been a powerful force, and their dismissal of the Council's warnings could have serious consequences. Zixa's fear was not only for the humans but for the galaxy as a whole. If the Zarkoni Empire underestimated humanity, they could provoke a conflict that might lead to disastrous results. And if that happened, the entire galaxy could be pulled into a war that no one was prepared for. As the doors closed behind Kaiser, Zixa turned back to the Council, her voice resolute. Let us vote now on the proposal to issue a galaxy-wide advisory regarding humanity. We must act quickly to avoid any further escalation and potential conflict. The vote proceeded, though. The tension in the room was palpable. Some delegates, still under the influence of Kaiser's confident dismissal, argued that humanity was no threat. Others, particularly those from species that had seen the rise and fall of empires, supported the warning. They knew the consequences of underestimating an emerging power. As the votes were tallied, Zixa stood motionless, her mind whirling with worry. The advisory had passed, but she couldn't shake the feeling that the Council's warning would fall on deaf ears in some corners of the galaxy, particularly the Zarkoni Empire. Kaiser's arrogance had been dangerous before, and now, with the possibility of the Zarkoni Empire making its own move, Zixa feared the consequences would be far-reaching. While the Council's warning had been issued, Zixa knew that the galaxy's response to humanity would not be so simple. There would be those who embraced the new species, and others who would seek to exploit or destroy them. As she looked around the room, she couldn't help but feel the weight of her responsibility. The future of the galaxy, Perhaps even the future of humanity now rested in the hands of the Council and those who would heed their warning. As the first light of day filtered through the atmosphere of New Eden, a peaceful human colony settled in a remote part of the galaxy. An ominous change was already unfolding. A fleet of Zarkoni warships, sleek and insectoid in design, cut through space with a chilling precision. The distance between the fleet and the planet was closing rapidly, and the human colonists, who had been so confident in their new home, were unaware of the impending storm. Dr. Alina Sato, a biologist at New Eden's primary research facility, stood by a large microscope, examining the latest samples of alien microorganisms discovered on the planet. The world was an exobiologist's dream, teeming with unknown life forms, and Elena's research had already begun to reveal groundbreaking secrets. She had been working tirelessly to uncover the mysteries of New Eden's ecosystem, but on this particular morning, her focus shifted. She glanced out of the lab's window, the view of the sprawling colony below catching her eye. The settlements stretched across the valley, their gleaming towers reflecting the soft glow of the rising sun. The image was one of peace, of a thriving, prosperous colony. Another day in paradise, Elena thought, her lips curving into a small smile as she stretched. Little did she know, this peaceful morning would soon become the beginning of a brutal conflict, one that would test the human spirit like never before. Far above the planet, on the bridge of the Zarkoni flagship Eternal Conquest, Emperor Zarin observed the approach to New Eden with growing amusement. He had heard the reports about the primitive humans of this colony, but to him, they seemed insignificant. The humans were no different from countless other species the Zarkoni Empire had conquered over the centuries. They were divided, scattered across a few worlds, their technology still in its infancy compared to the might of the Zarkoni fleet. The Emperor's mandibles clicked in anticipation as he surveyed the star map that highlighted the tiny, unassuming solar system. It would be an easy conquest. As Zarin issued his orders to prepare for the planetary assault on New Eden, the calm was shattered by a sudden panicked transmission. The colony's defense force, a modest group of soldiers and engineers tasked with keeping the peace, scrambled to assess the situation. Captain Jared Wallace, head of the defense, was among the first to receive the news. A fleet was approaching, a massive fleet, and it was not responding to any communication attempts. The humans had never faced a threat of this magnitude. In the command center, the atmosphere grew tense. "This is bad," Wallace muttered, his voice thick with concern as he turned to his officers. "We're not equipped to handle a full-scale invasion. Our defenses were meant to repel pirates, not an entire armada." The captain's words hung heavy in the room. The small defense force had managed to fend off a few pirate raids and minor threats, but they were nowhere near prepared for an invasion of this scale. It was clear that the colony had been caught off guard, completely unprepared for what was about to happen. Elena, who had received the distress call alongside the rest of the colony's leadership, made her way to the Colonial Administration building with urgency. Her mind raced with what could possibly be done to prepare for such an overwhelming threat. The governor, Isabella Reyes, had already called an emergency council meeting, and Elena needed to be there to offer her expertise on the biological and environmental aspects of the situation. As she rushed through the streets of Hope's Landing, she could hear the distant hum of sirens and see the growing tension in the faces of the colonists. But most were still unaware of the approaching invasion, going about their daily routines in the calm before the storm. Inside the council chambers, the room fell silent as Governor Reyes took her position at the head of the table. Her face, usually stern but composed, was now tight with worry as she addressed the leadership. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'll cut to the chase," she said. "We have an unidentified fleet approaching New Eden. They're not responding to any of our communications, and their numbers far exceed anything we've encountered before. We don't know who they are or what their intentions are, but I'm afraid we may be facing a full-scale invasion." A murmur rippled through the room, the severity of the situation sinking in. Captain Wallace was the first to speak. "Governor, with all due respect, we simply don't have the resources to defend ourselves. Our fleet is small, and our defense systems are outdated. We can't hold them off for long." Rise nodded solemnly, understanding the gravity of the situation. "I'm aware, Captain. That's why I've already sent a priority distress call to Earth. But given the distance, even if they send a fleet, it will take weeks for help to arrive. We are on our own." Alina felt a chill run down her spine. Weeks. They didn't have weeks. The colony would be gone before help even had a chance to arrive. "We need to think of evacuation plans," Dr. Sato said, her voice steady despite the growing sense of dread. "There are cave systems in the northern mountains that could shelter a significant portion of the population. If we can get people there, we might be able to buy some time until Earth can respond." The suggestion was met with murmurs of agreement, and the council quickly began to make plans. But as the meeting adjourned and officials scrambled to prepare, the reality of the situation began to sink in. Outside, the skies above New Eden were still clear. But as the minutes passed, the first signs of the impending invasion began to show. The Zarkoni fleet had arrived. Massive warships descended from the void, their sleek insectoid forms casting long shadows over the landscape as they prepared to bombard the surface. Their weaponry, far superior to anything the humans possessed, was primed and ready. Back at the command center, Captain Wallace was barking orders to his small fleet of interceptors. They were far outmatched, but it was their only hope. "All units. This is Captain Wallace," he called over the comms. "We are outnumbered and outgunned, but this is our home. These are our families. We hold the line here, no matter the cost." The response from his forces was immediate. A chorus of determined voices, colonists turned soldiers, who had never fought in a war but were now prepared to defend their new home. The battle began in earnest as the first shots rang out. The Zarkoni fleet unleashed a barrage of energy beams, cutting through the sky like a swarm of death. New Eden's interceptors scrambled to engage the enemy, weaving and dodging as they fired back with everything they had. On the ground, defense cannons roared to life, sending volley after volley of energy blasts into the air, hoping to hit anything before they were overwhelmed. For a brief, hopeful moment, it seemed as though the humans might be able to hold their own. Several Zarkoni ships were struck and exploded, spiraling down toward the wilderness beyond Hope's Landing. But that hope was short-lived. For every Zarkoni ship destroyed, 3 more appeared in its place. The sheer number of the invaders was too much. Dr. Sato watched the chaos unfold from the entrance of one of the northern caves where the colonists had begun to evacuate. She was doing her best to coordinate the movement of people, directing them into the caves, but the sight of the battle was haunting. Families streamed past her, carrying their children and a few belongings. The air was thick with the sound of distant explosions, and the sky above was darkening with smoke from the fallen ships. The calm, beautiful planet she had studied for years was now a battlefield. "How bad is it?" Marcus Chen, her assistant, asked as he joined her by the entrance. His face was drawn with exhaustion, but there was no time for rest. The fight was just beginning. "Bad," Elena replied, her voice grim. "Our defenses are barely slowing them down. They're targeting our infrastructure, our atmospheric processors, our power systems. If they destroy those, we could lose the entire planet." She could hear the sounds of more explosions in the distance, signaling that the invaders were already striking the heart of the colony. The battle raged on in the skies above as the ground forces fought desperately to protect their home. Wallace led his forces in a last-ditch effort to buy time for the evacuation, but the tide of battle was clearly turning against them. Despite their bravery, they were being overrun. The fight for New Eden was all but lost. Elena and Marcus made their way through the chaos, their hearts heavy with the weight of what was happening. The once thriving colony was burning, its buildings reduced to rubble by the relentless assault of the Zarkoni forces. The human spirit was being tested to its limits. And yet, amid the destruction, there was a glimmer of something more. The colonists fought on not because they had weapons or resources, but because they had each other. They fought for their families, for their homes, and for the future of their species. It was a fight for survival, a fight that would define humanity's place in the galaxy. As the sun began to set on the dying world of New Eden, Dr. Sato stood in the shadows, watching as the battle continued. She had seen the depths of human courage today, and she knew that no matter what happened next, humanity would survive. Against all odds, they would survive. As the battle for New Eden raged on, the colony's defense forces struggled against the overwhelming might of the Zarkoni Empire. The sky above the planet was thick with smoke from the fiery remnants of destroyed ships, and the ground shook from the constant explosions. New Eden, once a beacon of human resilience and hope, was now teetering on the brink of collapse. The small group of human defenders, led by Captain Jared Wallace, fought with every ounce of strength they had, though it seemed like they were being crushed under the sheer weight of the enemy's firepower. "Hold the line," Captain Wallace's voice rang out over the comms, his voice strained but resolute. "We cannot let them breach the colony. This is our home. We stand here and we fight for every man, woman, and child in New Eden." The message broadcast to the few remaining pilots in the air and soldiers on the ground was the last rallying cry. The human resistance wasn't just fighting to survive, they were fighting for the future of their species. Elena Sato, the biologist who had once spent her days studying the alien organisms of New Eden, was now deep in the heart of the colony's evacuation plan. In the caves, where the last survivors were being sheltered, she worked tirelessly alongside Marcus Chen, her assistant, and a team of volunteers, organizing the limited medical resources they had left. There was no time to dwell on the crushing losses. They had to keep going, keep moving, and most importantly, keep surviving. "Dr. Sato, we're running out of medical supplies," Marcus said, his voice tight with concern as he handed her a handful of bandages. His face was grim, and his exhaustion was evident in every line of his face. "What happens if we don't get help soon?" Elena looked at him, her expression resolute. "We do what we can. The people in these caves are our responsibility. We keep them alive for as long as possible." Her voice softened for a moment. "And we keep our hopes alive, Marcus. That's the most important thing right now." Meanwhile, in orbit above New Eden, the Zarkoni forces continued their brutal assault. The once pristine surface of the planet had been ravaged by the bombardment, and the colony's main defense infrastructure, its atmospheric processors and power grids, were beginning to crumble. If these systems fell, New Eden's atmosphere would quickly become unbreathable, and all life would perish. The damage was severe, and it seemed like there was no way to reverse the tide of destruction. On the flagship Eternal Conquest, Emperor Zarin watched the devastation unfold with a cruel satisfaction. His species, the Zarkoni, had long prided themselves on their military might and their ability to assimilate and dominate lesser species. The humans, so primitive and scattered across only a few worlds, had seemed like an easy target. The Emperor's compound eyes gleamed with pleasure as he monitored the progress of his invasion. These humans, like all the others before them, will fall, Zarin mused to his second-in-command, General Vexera. We shall wipe them from the galaxy as we have done with so many others. But even as Zarin celebrated his apparent victory, something unexpected was stirring in the depths of space. The emergency distress call from New Eden had reached Earth half a galaxy away. Within minutes, the highest levels of the United Earth government sprang into action. President Adaman Kruma, his face stern and determined, stood at the head of a war room filled with senior military and diplomatic leaders. The emergency message was clear. New Eden was under attack, and the colony's defenses had been overwhelmed. "We need to mobilize our forces," President Kruma said, his deep voice cutting through the tense silence of the room. "The Zarkoni Empire is attacking New Eden. The situation is critical, but we will not abandon our people. We must respond swiftly and decisively." Admiral Helena Giao, head of the United Earth Fleet, stepped forward. Her holographic image flickered to life in the center of the room. "Our fleet is not ready for an engagement of this scale, Mr. President. The Zarkoni have advanced technology, and their numbers are overwhelming. It will take us at least 3 weeks to arrive in the New Eden system." The urgency of the situation was evident. 3 weeks was far too long. New Eden's population was already being decimated, and the destruction of their atmosphere systems would soon make the entire planet uninhabitable. But there was little choice. Earth had to act quickly and do everything in its power to prepare a force capable of taking on the invaders. "We don't have 3 weeks," President Kruma said, his eyes narrowing. "We need to get everything we can into motion right now. Admiral, prepare our fleet for immediate departure. And Dr. Tanaka, I want the Arcturus defense platform operational in 1 week, not 3. The Arcturus defense platform, still in the final stages of development, was Earth's last line of defense. It was a massive space station designed to house a revolutionary weapon, a gravitational lens capable of focusing and amplifying energy to create a beam powerful enough to cut through entire fleets. It was humanity's most advanced weapon, but it was also untested and unknown factor in this desperate race against time. "We will not go quietly into the night," President Kruma continued, rallying his leaders. "Humanity has faced extinction before. We survived the ice ages, we survived plagues, and we survived ourselves. And we will survive this." With those words, the wheels of humanity's response were set into motion. Earth's shipyards, long dormant, sprang to life as workers rushed to upgrade warships, many of them hastily recommissioned from previous service. The fleet was mobilized, and the Arcturus platform's engineers worked tirelessly, pushing the technology to its limits in a desperate bid to turn the tide. As the Earth fleet began to assemble, Dr. Yuki Wadi, one of Earth's leading quantum physicists, made a groundbreaking discovery. Her team had been working on a faster-than-light communication system using quantum entanglement, and after weeks of hard work, they finally succeeded. "We've done it, Doctor," Wadi breathed, staring at the results with disbelief. "We can send messages instantaneously across vast distances." The breakthrough was monumental. Within hours, President Kruma drafted a message to be sent to New Eden. "People of New Eden," the message read, "This is President Kruma. We have received your distress call. Help is on the way. Hold fast. Stay strong. Earth stands with you. We will not abandon you." The message was broadcast to the colonies of New Eden, a beacon of hope for the survivors who had begun to despair in the face of overwhelming odds. And so, the Earth fleet set off toward New Eden, racing through the vast emptiness of space. The fleet was a symbol of humanity's resilience, a force born not just from technological might, but from an unbreakable will to survive and protect their own. Captain Aisha Okono, commander of the lead warship Indomitable, stood on the bridge, staring out into the void of space. "We have one chance to make it right," she said, her voice resolute. "Let's give everything we have." As the fleet sped toward New Eden, the first of their ships, outfitted with newly developed weapons and advanced shield systems, entered the fray, the battle for New Eden began to shift. Though the Zarkoni forces had the upper hand in terms of numbers, Earth's new technologies such as the reverse-engineered Zarkoni shield technology allowed humanity's ships to stand their ground. Meanwhile, back on the surface of New Eden, the human resistance continued to hold out. Captain Wallace, though battered and outnumbered, fought valiantly alongside his small group of soldiers. They had little left in terms of ammunition, but they fought with everything they had, using whatever they could to slow down the invaders. Each destroyed Zarkoni ship, each successful defense, was a victory, and it bought precious time for the survivors to evacuate. And then, in the skies above New Eden, the impossible happened. The Arcturus defense platform, having been hurriedly brought online, unleashed its devastating weapon. The beam cut through the Zarkoni fleet like a hot knife through butter, disintegrating the alien ships with unimaginable precision. Within minutes, half of the Zarkoni armada was reduced to debris, leaving the remaining invaders stunned and vulnerable. For the humans on the ground, the tide had turned. With the Zarkoni forces reeling from the unexpected devastation, the human resistance saw an opportunity. Captain Wallace's forces launched a final, desperate assault against the remaining invaders. In the chaos, the Zarkoni troops were scattered, their command structure broken. It was a victory not just for New Eden, but for humanity. The invaders, once so certain of their superiority, had underestimated the strength of the human spirit. They had awakened a sleeping giant, and now that giant was awake, ready to defend its future. In the aftermath of the battle, President Krumah addressed Earth's people, his voice filled with pride and conviction. "Today, humanity has proven itself," he said. "We fought not just for our survival, but for our future, and we will continue to fight, together as one united species." And with that, humanity had taken its first step toward becoming a powerful force in the galaxy, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. United, determined, and unyielding, the weeks that followed the Battle of New Eden were a blur of activity, both on the war-torn surface of the planet and across Earth. The victory over the Zarkoni Empire, against all odds, was a turning point not just for humanity, but for the entire galaxy. Earth's fleet had arrived just in time to turn the tide of the battle, and with the power of the Arcturus defense platform, the remaining Zarkoni forces had been shattered. The fight for New Eden was over, but the consequences of that victory were just beginning to unfold. On the surface of New Eden, the aftermath was a scene of both devastation and remarkable resilience. Hope's Landing, once a vibrant hub of human life, now lay in ruins. Buildings that had stood tall for years were now burned-out shells, crumbling under the weight of the bombardment. The colony's atmospheric processors, though largely intact, had taken heavy damage. The repair crews worked around the clock, trying to restore life support systems and make the planet habitable once more. The scars of the invasion were deep, but so was humanity's determination to rebuild. Dr. Alina Sato, who had watched the battle unfold from the caves in the north, stood at the entrance of the newly established command center, her heart heavy with both relief and sorrow. The survivors who had huddled in the caves were now emerging, blinking in the bright light of the early morning sun. Children clung to their parents, some still too shocked to fully comprehend the magnitude of what they had endured. The colonists, once so full of hope for the future, now faced a world that had been irrevocably changed. "Dr. Sato," Marcus Chen said, approaching her with a hesitant smile. "We did it. We survived." Elena looked at him, her expression a mixture of exhaustion and disbelief. "Yes, we did," she said softly, her voice strained. "But at what cost?" Marcus nodded, his face drawn. "The planet will never be the same. The city. Everything we've built here." "It doesn't matter," Elena interrupted gently, placing a hand on his shoulder. "We've proven that humanity can survive, even in the face of overwhelming odds. We'll rebuild. We always do, and rebuild they did. New Eden, though scarred, became a symbol of human resilience. Teams of engineers and scientists, both from Earth and the colony, worked tirelessly to restore what was lost and improve upon it. The knowledge gained from studying the Zarkoni technology provided a huge boost to humanity's scientific progress. In just a few short months, the colony was beginning to take shape again. New buildings were rising from the ashes, and the terraforming processes were back on track. Life, once again, began to flourish. The greatest testament to humanity's victory, however, was not the rebuilding of New Eden, but the recognition that followed. The Galactic Council, which had once been wary of humanity's unpredictable nature, now turned its gaze toward Earth with a new sense of respect and perhaps even fear. The battle for New Eden had shown the galaxy just what humanity was capable of, and the consequences of underestimating that power were clear. High Counselor Zixa, whose voice had once echoed with concern over humanity's potential to disrupt the peace of the galaxy, now found herself in a position of reckoning. The Council convened in an emergency session, as representatives from countless worlds gathered to discuss the implications of humanity's sudden rise to prominence. Zix's bioluminescent skin flickered with a mixture of emotions as she addressed the assembly. "Esteemed colleagues," she began, her voice steady but filled with the weight of the situation. "The humans have demonstrated both terrifying potential for destruction and inspiring capacity for unity and innovation. The events on New Eden have shown that they are a force to be reckoned with, one that must not be underestimated. Their resilience is unparalleled, and their ability to adapt is both remarkable and, at times, unsettling." The council chamber was filled with murmurs of agreement, though some delegates were still hesitant to fully embrace humanity's new position. "What does this mean for us?" one delegate asked, his voice tinged with apprehension. "Should we allow Earth a seat at the council? Can we afford to recognize them as an equal?" Zixa paused, considering the question carefully. "We must. Humanity has earned its place in the galaxy, whether we are ready to admit it or not. Their actions on New Eden have proven that they are not a threat, but a potential ally. They are no longer a species that can be dismissed as primitive or unworthy of our attention. It is time for the galaxy to recognize their role in the future of this universe." The debate that followed was long and heated, but in the end, a decision was reached. Humanity would be granted a probationary seat on the Galactic Council, with full membership to be determined after a period of observation and cooperation. It was a historic moment, one that marked the beginning of a new era for both Earth and the galaxy at large. Back on Earth, President Adaman Kruma addressed the people in a live broadcast, his voice filled with pride and determination. "Today, we stand not as conquerors, but as partners," he said, his deep voice carrying across the world. "The victory on New Eden was not just for us. It was for all of humanity, We proved to the galaxy that we are capable of both great strength and great compassion. We fought for our future, and we will continue to build that future, together with our new allies." The mood on Earth was one of cautious optimism. There was still much to be done, many challenges lay ahead, but the victory over the Zarkoni Empire had united humanity in a way that nothing else had. The war was over, but the battle for the future was just beginning. As the years passed, humanity's influence across the galaxy grew. Earth's ships, now equipped with advanced technologies from both human ingenuity and reverse-engineered alien systems, began to explore further into the stars than ever before. Colonies were established on distant worlds, and massive space stations were built in orbit around gas giants and barren moons. The knowledge gleaned from the study of Zarkoni technology accelerated human advancement by decades, making the impossible possible. On New Eden, life flourished once again. The scars of the invasion remained, but they were a testament to what humanity had overcome. The colony became a hub of interspecies cooperation and scientific advancement. It was no longer just a symbol of survival. It was a beacon of what humanity could achieve when united. Governor Alina Sato, now one of the most respected figures in the galaxy, stood at the head of the colony's new cultural exchange program. She had been instrumental in leading the resistance during the invasion, and her role in the rebuilding efforts had earned her the admiration of both her fellow humans and alien species alike. New Eden was flourishing once again, and its people had proven that they were more than capable of not just surviving, but thriving. "It's one thing to fight for our place in the galaxy," Elena said as she stood on the balcony overlooking the bustling colony. "But it's another to actually live up to it." Her assistant, Marcus Chen, stood beside her, gazing out at the horizon. "True," he replied, "but if there's one thing I've learned, it's that humanity has a way of surprising everyone, especially ourselves." In the years that followed, humanity continued to prove that they were a force to be reckoned with, both in times of peace and in times of conflict. As Earth ships ventured further into the galaxy, they encountered new species, some friendly and some hostile, but always with the understanding that humanity had earned its place among the stars. The Galactic Council, now accepting Earth's full membership, recognized that humanity's future was intertwined with the future of the galaxy itself. The Zarkoniano Empire, once so certain of their superiority, was now a diminished power, reeling from the aftermath of their failed invasion. The lessons learned from the conflict with humanity had caused ripples of change throughout their empire, with many of their subjects now calling for reforms. The Zarkoni, once conquerors, were now in the process of rebuilding their empire under a new system that emphasized cooperation over conquest. As for New Eden, it became a shining example of human potential. The once crippled colony now stood as a beacon of hope, a symbol of what humanity could achieve when pushed to its limits. The caves that had sheltered survivors during the invasion were transformed into a memorial, a reminder of the price humanity had paid for its victory. 10 years after the battle, New Eden held a grand ceremony to commemorate the event that had changed the course of galactic history. Representatives from Earth, the Galactic Council, and dozens of alien species gathered in the central plaza to honor the fallen and to celebrate the victory. President Kruma, now an elder statesman, stood before the crowd, his voice strong and proud. "Today," he said, "we stand not as conquerors, but as partners. We are no longer an isolated species, but an integral part of this galaxy. And as we look to the future, we do so with hope, knowing that together we can face anything that comes our way." As the ceremony ended and the stars above New Eden twinkled brightly, Elena Sato stood alongside Marcus, watching the light show unfold in the sky. The future was uncertain, filled with both promise and peril. But humanity had proven that it was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Together, they had forged a future among the stars, one that would be shaped by their determination, their courage, and their unwavering belief in the power of the human spirit. As the human forces readied themselves to respond to the urgent threat from the Zarkoni Empire, the people of Earth found themselves at a crossroads. The emergency broadcast from New Eden had reached the planet, but it was a grim message, one that made it clear that the colony's defenses had been overwhelmed. There were no more illusions of safety. The fight for survival had begun, and it was clear that humanity's resolve would be tested like never before. In the deepest chambers of Earth's government, President Adam Nkrumah stood before a room filled with military leaders, scientists, and strategists. His usually composed face was etched with concern, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. "The people of New Eden are under attack," he said, his voice steady but filled with an undeniable urgency. "We cannot afford to wait any longer. We will act now, with everything we have. Earth's response must be swift and decisive." Admiral Helena Jiao, a seasoned leader of Earth's military forces, nodded firmly. She was a woman of action, a strategist who had trained for moments like this. "The Zarkoni are formidable," she said, her tone calculating. "Their technology far outmatches ours in many areas, but we have one thing they don't: our resolve. We will not let this stand." Behind the Admiral, Dr. Hiroshi Tanaka, Earth's leading scientist in weapons development, adjusted his glasses and spoke up. "The Arcturus defense platform is ready for deployment, Mr. President. It is untested in battle, but if it works as we anticipate, it could turn the tide. It's humanity's last line of defense." The room fell into a heavy silence. The Arcturus platform, a massive orbital station equipped with a revolutionary gravitational lens capable of concentrating energy into a single beam of unprecedented power, had been Earth's greatest technological gamble. It had been designed for one purpose: to defend against an existential threat. But as with any new weapon, there were risks that could determine the fate of an entire species. Nkrumah looked around the room, meeting the eyes of his closest advisors. "We're all aware of what's at stake. This is not just a battle for New Eden. It's a battle for the survival of humanity, our children's future. We cannot allow the Zarkoni to destroy what we've worked so hard to build." The emergency response teams worked relentlessly, mobilizing the remaining Earth fleets and preparing the Arcturus platform for immediate activation. In just days, the Earth Defense Fleet was assembled, a force of over 200 ships, some of them hastily repurposed, but all ready for the fight. The fleet's flagship, the Indomitable, was commanded by Captain Aisha Okono, a young but highly respected officer who had proven herself during previous skirmishes with pirate factions in deep space. Captain Okono stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, her eyes scanning the view screen as Earth's fleet prepared to embark. The final preparations were being made, and she could feel the weight of her responsibility pressing down on her. This was no longer just about strategy and tactics. This was about survival. "Helm," she called to her officer, her voice calm but carrying the gravity of the situation. "Set course for New Eden. Full speed ahead. We're the last line of defense. We're going to make sure humanity survives." As the Earth fleet sailed into the depths of space, a sense of unity washed over the soldiers, scientists, and engineers aboard the ships. They were all part of something far greater than themselves. They were united not by borders, but by a singular purpose: the fate of New Eden and the future of humanity depended on their success. The fleet's engines hummed with life, pushing forward toward the unknown, and the battle for survival began. Meanwhile, back on New Eden, the surviving colonists in the northern caves were living in fear, unsure of whether the reinforcements from Earth would arrive in time. Dr. Sato, once dedicated to studying the alien life forms of the planet, now found herself leading the last pockets of resistance. Her team had moved swiftly, using every ounce of ingenuity to slow the advance of the Zarkoni forces, buying precious time for the civilians in hiding. Elena knew that time was running out. The Zarkoni were relentless, and the last hope for New Eden lay in the arrival of Earth's fleet. But even that seemed uncertain. Would they be able to arrive in time to prevent the total destruction of the colony? Would the Arcturus platform, humanity's most powerful weapon, be enough to turn the tide of the battle? As the battle escalated in the skies, the surviving humans fought desperately on the ground, clinging to the hope that reinforcements were on their way. The odds were heavily stacked against them, but they fought on, driven by the same spirit that had carried humanity through countless crises before. It was in their blood, this will to fight, to survive, no matter the cost. And then, the breakthrough came. The Indomitable and the rest of Earth's fleet emerged from hyperspace, arriving in orbit above New Eden just as the Zarkoni forces were about to launch their final assault on the colony. The sight of the massive fleet descending upon the battlefield was enough to send a wave of relief through the surviving colonists below. The Zarkoni, caught off guard by the unexpected reinforcements, hesitated for a crucial moment. That hesitation proved to be fatal. Now, Captain O'Connor's voice rang out, firm and commanding, through the comms. Engage the enemy, all ships, weapons hot. The battle that followed was like no other humanity had faced. The Earth fleet, now bolstered by the activation of the Arcturus platform, unleashed a torrent of devastating energy blasts that tore through the ranks of the Zarkoni fleet. The gravitational lens of the Arcturus defense platform, having been calibrated to its full power, focused a beam of pure energy on the heart of the Zarkoni armada. In an instant, the flagship Eternal Conquest and its escort ships disintegrated, their hulking remains reduced to space debris. The shockwave of destruction sent ripples through the entire battlefield, leaving the remaining Zarkoni forces stunned and vulnerable. Captain O'Connor pressed the advantage, coordinating with Admiral Jiao to envelop the enemy in a pincer movement. The Earth fleet, using the debris field as cover, attacked from all directions. The battle was intense, but the tide had clearly turned in humanity's favor. As the last of the Zarkoni ships were destroyed or forced to retreat, a cheer erupted through the comms channels. It was a bittersweet victory. The damage to New Eden was severe, and many had lost their lives, but humanity had survived. Against all odds, Earth had won. In the aftermath of the battle, President Kruma addressed the world once again. "We have done it," he said, his voice steady and proud. "We have stood together and faced down a threat that none of us could have imagined. The victory at New Eden is a victory for all of humanity. It is proof that when we unite, we are capable of overcoming anything." The news spread like wildfire across Earth and its colonies. For the first time, humanity felt a true sense of solidarity. The fear of the unknown, the uncertainty of their place in the galaxy, had been replaced by something else: confidence. Earth had proven that it could defend itself. It had earned the respect of the galaxy, and it was ready to take its place among the stars. But there was no time for celebration. The victory was important, but it was only the beginning. Humanity had learned a valuable lesson from the invasion of New Eden. The universe was vast and full of dangers, but it was also full of opportunities. The galaxy was not just a place to be feared, it was a place to explore, to engage with, and to shape. The lesson humanity learned was clear. When faced with overwhelming adversity, the strength of the human spirit could turn the tide. It was not technology alone that won the battle, it was the unity, resilience, and sheer willpower of people who refused to back down in the face of destruction. Humanity's strength lay not in their weapons, but in their capacity for cooperation, determination, and hope. The battle for New Eden had proven that, above all else, humanity's greatest asset was their ability to rise, no matter how high the odds. This lesson, this unyielding spirit, would guide humanity as they ventured further into the galaxy, seeking new alliances, new challenges, and new frontiers. The victory over the Zarkoni Empire was not just a military triumph, it was a triumph of human potential. And as humanity took its first steps into the broader universe, they did so with the confidence that their place among the stars was not just earned by their might, but by their courage to embrace the unknown and push forward into the future.